The American housing market spent years tilting in one direction, and only one direction: up. Sellers sat comfortably, waiting for buyers to line up at their door with cash offers and waived inspections. Properties sold in days, sometimes hours. Bidding wars became routine, and homeowners grew convinced their equity would never stop climbing. But 2025 has torn that narrative apart. In markets across the country, the power dynamic has completely reversed. Inventory is piling up. Days on market are stretching into months. And sellers who once laughed off lowball offers are now begging just to get one. Interest rates that climbed without mercy, stagnant wages, and years of overbuilding have finally collided. In some cities, price cuts are the rule, not the exception. Open houses sit empty. Luxury developments that promised endless demand now face rows of unsold units. And the swagger that defined sellers for half a decade has evaporated into quiet desperation. If you've been priced out, outbid, or pushed aside by the chaos of recent years, this is the shift you've been waiting for. Today, we're breaking down 9 U.S. housing markets where sellers are practically begging for offers in 2025. Make sure to hit subscribe right now, because what's happening in these cities could redefine home ownership across the entire country. Let's jump in. Number 9. Boise, Idaho. Boise rode the pandemic wave harder than almost any city in America. Remote workers flooded in from California, Oregon, and Washington, armed with tech salaries and a hunger for mountain air. Prices doubled in some neighborhoods. Builders threw up developments as fast as permits allowed, and for a brief moment, Boise felt like the next big thing. But that moment is over. In 2025, the city is drowning in listings. Homes that sold for $650,000 2 years ago are now sitting unsold at $525,000, and sellers are still dropping prices every few weeks. The out-of-state buyers who fueled the frenzy have mostly disappeared. Remote work mandates are tightening. Tech layoffs have gutted the very demographic Boise relied on. And the local economy, built on healthcare, education, and retail, was never strong enough to support those inflated prices on its own. Subdivisions in Meridian and Eagle that were packed with new construction now have entire streets lined with for-sale signs. Developers are slashing prices on brand new builds just to move inventory before carrying costs bury them. In some cases, sellers are offering to cover closing costs, buy down interest rates, even throw in furniture, anything to get a deal across the finish line. But buyers aren't biting. They've seen the trend. They know prices are still falling, and they're in no rush to catch a falling knife. Boise's story is a textbook case of what happens when hype outpaces reality. The city that became a symbol of pandemic-era opportunity is now a warning about betting everything on a wave that was never going to last. Number 8. Austin, Texas. Austin has spent the last few years marketing itself as the future of American innovation. Tesla, Oracle, and a parade of startups relocated there. The city's skyline exploded with cranes and glass towers, and prices followed, climbing so fast that longtime residents barely recognized their own neighborhoods. But by 2025, that momentum has slammed into reverse. Home prices have dropped nearly 10% year over year in some zip codes, and the market is flooded with inventory that no one seems to want. Luxury condos downtown are sitting vacant. Suburban developments in Pflugerville and Round Rock have rows of completed homes with no buyers in sight. Sellers who listed confidently 6 months ago are now reducing prices and begging their agents for advice. The tech sector that powered Austin's rise is now its greatest liability. Layoffs have gutted the high-income workforce. Companies that promised permanent relocations are quietly scaling back. And the remote workers who drove the initial surge are either gone or no longer earning Bay Area paychecks. Even investors who snatched up properties during the boom are unloading them at a loss. Airbnb owners who expected endless weekend demand are converting units back to long-term rentals, and even those are struggling to find tenants. The city's affordability crisis, once a point of pride for attracting young talent, has become a trap. Prices rose so high that even with today's corrections, many locals still can't afford to buy. And outsiders, the ones who could afford it, are no longer interested. Austin thought it could ride the wave forever. Instead, it's learning the same painful lesson as every other boomtown. Growth built on hype doesn't last, and when the momentum stops, the fall is fast and unforgiving. Number 7. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix built its identity on endless expansion. Sprawling master-planned communities stretched across the desert. Snowbirds, retirees, and West Coast transplants kept demand humming. Builders treated the metro like a blank canvas, and for years it worked. But in 2025, the canvas is overcrowded, and the buyers have vanished. Homes are sitting on the market for 90, 100, even 120 days. Sellers are slashing prices by 30,000, 50,000, sometimes more, just to generate interest. And still, many properties aren't moving. The problem is twofold: oversupply and weakness in the core buyer base. Developers didn't just build during the boom, they overbuilt by a staggering margin. Entire neighborhoods in Goodyear, Buckeye, and Queen Creek are filled with spec homes that were supposed to sell before the frames were even finished. Instead, they're complete, empty, and bleeding builders dry. Meanwhile, the retirees and remote workers who powered Phoenix's growth are pulling back. Rising insurance costs, brutal summers, and concerns about water availability have made the desert less appealing. Californians who once saw Phoenix as the affordable escape are now looking elsewhere or staying put, and the investors who scooped up rental properties are realizing the math no longer works. Property taxes are up, HOA fees are climbing, and rent growth has stalled, meaning cash flow has turned negative for thousands of small landlords. Desperation is creeping into every corner of the market. Sellers are offering to pay buyers closing costs, cover HOA fees for a year, even include vehicles or vacation packages just to sweeten deals. It's not working. Buyers know the market is still falling. They've seen the price cuts. They've watched the listings pile up. And they're waiting for the bottom, whenever that might come. Phoenix was supposed to be the Sunbelt's safest bet. Instead, it's become one of its biggest cautionary tales. Number 6. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas has always thrived on risk. But in 2025, it's the homeowners and builders taking the biggest losses. For years, the city's housing market fed off Californians fleeing high costs and investors chasing rental income. Entire neighborhoods sprang up on the edges of the valley. Builders marketed Las Vegas as the land of opportunity, low taxes, and endless sunshine. But the opportunity has dried up, and the market is in free fall. Home prices have dropped around 8% year over year, and in some neighborhoods, the decline is closer to 12%. Sellers who bought at the peak are now underwater, owing more than their homes are worth. And the flood of new construction has only made things worse. Subdivisions in North Las Vegas and Henderson are filled with unsold inventory. Builders are offering $40,000 in incentives, rate buy-downs, and even paid-off Tesla vehicles just to move units. It's not enough. The core issue is that Las Vegas's economy is too fragile to support the housing prices sellers are asking. Tourism is inconsistent. The service jobs that power the Strip don't pay enough for home ownership, and the Californians who drove demand are no longer coming in the same numbers. Instead, they're choosing Phoenix, Reno, or staying home. Investors are bailing too. Short-term rental operators who bought multiple properties during the boom are selling at steep discounts, trying to escape before the market drops further. The homes they're dumping are flooding an already saturated market, pushing prices down even more. For sellers, it's a nightmare. Homes sit for months with barely any showings. Price cuts become routine, and even then, offers are rare and often insultingly low. Las Vegas built its housing market on the same foundation as its casinos, the belief that the next wave of money was always coming. But in 2025, the house is losing, and the dealers are walking away from the table. Number 5. Denver, Colorado. Denver was the darling of the Mountain West, a city that combined outdoor culture, a strong job market, and an educated population. For over a decade, it seemed untouchable. But in 2025, cracks are showing everywhere. Home prices are sliding, inventory is climbing, and sellers who expected quick sales are now sitting on properties for months, watching their equity evaporate. The Denver Metro added thousands of housing units between 2021 and 2024, anticipating continued population growth. That growth never materialized. Remote work pulled people to smaller towns like Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, and Grand Junction. Others left the state entirely. priced out by Denver's rising cost of living. And the tech sector, once a reliable driver of high-income buyers, has been gutted by layoffs. Neighborhoods that used to see multiple offers are now seeing zero. Sellers in suburbs like Arvada, Thornton, and Aurora are cutting prices by $20,000, $30,000, even $40,000. Luxury homes in Cherry Creek and Wash Park, areas that never saw discounts, are now sitting unsold for half a year or more. Builders are in panic mode too. Communities on the edge of the metro, places that were supposed to attract young families, are ghost towns. Finished homes sit empty. Model homes that used to buzz with weekend traffic now go days without a single visitor. For sellers, the psychology has shifted. Desperation has replaced confidence. They're no longer setting the terms. Buyers are. And buyers, seeing the trend, are holding out for even bigger discounts, knowing that time is on their side. Denver's housing correction is a slow bleed. Not a crash, but a steady, painful decline that's forcing everyone who bought in the last 3 years to confront an uncomfortable truth. The equity they thought they had was built on speculation, not fundamentals. And now it's disappearing. Number 4. Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville rode a wave of cultural momentum that few cities could match. It became the go-to destination for young professionals, country music fans, and corporate relocations. The population swelled, construction boomed, and home prices soared right alongside the city's reputation. But in 2025, that shine has dimmed considerably. Prices have dropped roughly 7% year over year, and the market is glutted with homes that simply aren't selling. Sellers are throwing everything they can at buyers: price cuts, upgraded appliances, seller-paid closing costs. Yet listings sit untouched. The core problem is that Nashville overbuilt for a population surge that's no longer coming. Remote work allowed people to test drive the city during the pandemic, but many have since moved on. The jobs that drew them, tech, healthcare, entertainment, aren't expanding fast enough to support the housing supply that was built in anticipation. Suburbs like Franklin, Murfreesboro, and Brentwood are especially hard hit. These were the areas that captured the bulk of new construction, and now they're filled with for sale signs that have been up for months. Developers who built spec homes expecting fast flips are now sitting on unsold inventory, paying carry costs that are bleeding them dry. Even downtown Nashville, which used to command premium prices, is seeing softness. Condos that sold for $500,000 in 2022 are now listed at $425,000 with no takers. Investors who bought expecting Airbnb gold are realizing the market is oversaturated. Occupancy rates have tanked, and many are selling at a loss just to get out. For sellers, it's a harsh reality check. The city that felt like it couldn't lose is now losing badly, and the optimism that fueled Nashville's rise has been replaced by a grinding awareness that not every hot market stays hot forever. Number 3. Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City spent years being praised as one of the most balanced, sustainable housing markets in the country. Strong job growth, a young population, and a stable economy made it a favorite among economists and investors alike. But 2025 has shattered that reputation. Prices are falling fast, and sellers are panicking. In just the past year, home values have dropped nearly 9%, and in some neighborhoods, the decline is even steeper. The city's affordability crisis, once a sign of demand, has become a trap. Prices climbed so high during the boom that even with today's corrections, many locals still can't afford to buy. And the out-of-state buyers who powered the market, mostly Californians, have largely disappeared. Subdivisions in West Jordan, Harriman, and Lehigh are packed with unsold homes. Builders are offering massive incentives, free upgrades, paid closing costs, interest rate buydowns. But even with all that, inventory keeps stacking up. The tech sector, which was supposed to be Salt Lake's economic engine, has stalled. Layoffs have wiped out high-income buyers, and companies that talked about major expansions are now pulling back. The ripple effect is hitting every level of the market. Sellers are slashing prices weekly. Homes that should sell in days are sitting for months. And the few buyers still looking are making lowball offers, knowing sellers have no leverage. Even Utah's strong cultural ties and family-oriented reputation aren't enough to stabilize the market. Young families who wanted to buy are renting instead. Investors who bought rental properties are selling at losses. And the sense of stability that once defined Salt Lake City's housing market has completely vanished. In 2025, Salt Lake is learning a hard lesson. Even the most stable markets can unravel when supply outpaces demand and the economy shifts. The city that seemed immune is now just as vulnerable as everywhere else. Number 2. Tampa, Florida. Tampa was the poster child for Florida's explosive growth. Retirees, remote workers, and investors poured in. Developers raced to keep up, building everything from luxury condos to sprawling suburban developments. And for a while, it seemed like Tampa could do no wrong. But 2025 has exposed just how fragile that growth really was. Home prices have fallen about 10%, and the market is flooded with inventory no one wants. Sellers are desperate, slashing prices and offering every incentive imaginable. But buyers are staying away, spooked by rising insurance costs, hurricane risks, and an overall sense that Florida's boom was built on sand. Insurance has become the silent killer of Tampa's market. Premiums have tripled in some areas, adding hundreds of dollars to monthly housing costs. For buyers on tight budgets, it's the difference between affording a home and walking away. And sellers, many of whom bought when insurance was cheap, are now stuck trying to offload properties that are essentially unaffordable for the next generation of buyers. Investors are fleeing too. The short-term rental market that once thrived is now oversaturated. Occupancy rates have collapsed, and owners who bought multiple properties are panic selling. The homes they're dumping are flooding the market, driving prices down even further. Suburban areas like Brandon, Riverview, and Wesley Chapel are especially hard hit. New developments that were supposed to sell out in months now have dozens of unsold homes. Builders are cutting prices by $50,000 or more, and it's still not enough. Tampa's market isn't just cooling, it's collapsing under the weight of its own hype. Sellers who thought they'd cash out are now trapped. And the Florida dream that brought so many people here is turning into a financial nightmare for those trying to leave. Number 1. Charlotte, North Carolina. At the top of the list is Charlotte, a city that spent the last decade being called the future of the American South. Banks relocated there. Young professionals flooded in. Developers built with wild abandon, convinced that demand would never slow. But in 2025, Charlotte's housing market is in full retreat. Prices have dropped roughly 11%, and sellers are more desperate here than almost anywhere else in the country. Listings are sitting for months. Price cuts are constant. And even with aggressive concessions, buyers aren't interested. The problem is that Charlotte overbuilt on a scale that's hard to comprehend. Between 2020 and 2024, the metro added more than 60,000 new housing units. That's far more than the population growth could support. And now, the consequences are everywhere. Subdivisions in Huntersville, Concord, and Matthews are filled with unsold homes. Builders are offering $60,000 in incentives, paying closing costs, buying down interest rates, anything to move inventory. It's not working. Buyers see the desperation and they're holding out, waiting for even steeper discounts. Charlotte's banking sector, once its greatest strength, is now a liability. Layoffs have gutted the high-income professional class that powered the housing market. And the transplants from the Northeast who drove demand during the pandemic are either gone or no longer looking to buy. Even luxury developments uptown, projects that were supposed to redefine the skyline, are sitting partially empty. Units that were priced at $800,000 are now listed at $650,000 with no takers. For sellers, the situation has gone from uncomfortable to dire. They're not just competing with other sellers, they're competing with builders offering brand new homes at fire sale prices. And in that fight, existing homeowners are losing badly. Charlotte's collapse is the clearest signal yet that the seller's market is over. The city that symbolized Southern growth and opportunity is now a cautionary tale about what happens when optimism runs too far ahead of reality. This seismic shift, however, presents a nuanced landscape, not a monolithic collapse. While the broad stroke is a buyer's advantage, the intensity of seller desperation varies wildly, often dictated by the specific boom and bust cycle each city endured. The sellers in Charlotte, North Carolina, for instance, are wrestling with an almost overwhelming glut of new construction, forcing them into a brutal price war with deep-pocketed developers who can afford to bleed cash for longer. Their despair is rooted in systemic oversupply. Contrast this with the plight of the sellers in Tampa, Florida, whose agony is compounded not just by inventory, but by an external factor, crippling non-negotiable insurance premiums that have fundamentally redefined the cost of ownership, essentially shrinking the qualified buyer pool overnight. In places like Boise and Austin, the wound is largely a self-inflicted economic one, a retreat of the remote, high-earning tech demographic that fueled the initial frenzy, leaving behind a local economy too fragile to sustain the phantom values created by transient wealth. What links these disparate struggles is a shared pathology, the realization that the soaring equity of the recent past was not a permanent fixture of value, but a temporary asset inflated by cheap money and a pandemic-driven flight from major metros. Every city on this list is now experiencing the painful, protracted process of price discovery, finding its true, less flattering equilibrium. This transition is not instantaneous. It's a grinding negotiation where buyers, finally empowered, are demanding not just modest discounts, but a full reversal of the pandemic premium, forcing sellers to contend with the cruel math of their mortgages and the vanishing specter of a quick, profitable exit. This market correction is less a single event and more a sustained siege, eroding confidence one price cut at a time and forever altering the psychological contract of homeownership in the American boomtowns. Across these 9 markets, the message is unmistakable. The power has shifted. For years, sellers dictated terms, set prices, and watched buyers scramble. But that era is over. Inventory is rising, prices are falling, and for the first time in a long time, buyers hold the leverage. What we're seeing isn't just a correction, it's a reckoning. Cities that built too much, too fast, are paying the price. Sellers who bought at the peak are trapped, and the confidence that defined the housing market for half a decade has been replaced by uncertainty and fear. If you've been waiting for your moment, this might be it. But these shifts don't last forever. Markets adapt, sellers adjust, and eventually, the cycle begins again. Stay informed, keep watching, and if this breakdown gave you a new perspective, make sure to subscribe and share this video. The housing market is changing fast, and understanding where it's headed could be the edge you need.